Welcome to the game, everybody. This is the show where we go play by play in the game of politics. We got an exciting show today. We got two special guests joining us for this episode because we're going to be going through the lineup of topics. Before doing intros, let's go through that lineup. Today, we're going to be covering about 3 to 4 main topics. Look, the news of the day when it comes to the economy is really about these trade deals that President Trump from the campaign said he would make, and now the day has arrived where they've announced deals with the European Union, deals with the United Kingdom, South Korea, several other states, but also tariffs. For those countries who have not come to the negotiation table with the president, they're seeing tariffs facing their economy now. Also, the Department of Homeland Security, they're with a new report. They're talking about crime that has dropped across the cities in the United States. So we're going to go over the numbers. We're going to go over the reason behind why and what this means politically. What does this mean for the president? Is this promise kept? What does it mean for Democrats that many times have been coming against the president in this space? Also, it's the beginning of August recess. This is the first week in this session that Congress is on break the entire month. What does this mean? This means that Democrats and Republicans are going back to the districts. They're going back to voters. They're talking about what they've done or not done. Democrats have already announced what they're calling a summer blitz, where they're going to be attacking the agenda of Republicans, not just what they've done the last few months, but what they're going to be doing for the rest of the year. And then towards the end, we're going to be talking about American Eagle and Sydney Sweeney. Their stock, the stock of American Eagle, is up 10%. What does this mean? People are not just voting in elections, but people are also voting with their pocket, what they believe in and what they don't stand for. So I want to welcome now to the show two of our guests that we have here. We have Driena Sixto. She is the host of Claro y Directo, a Spanish language daily news show. Make sure to tune in for those Spanish speakers. She's also a longtime leader with Turning Point USA and Turning Point Action. A lot of great work there. We're excited to have you here, Driena. Thank you.
Thank you
for being
having
here
me.
in studio.
Excited.
We also have Angelina Tamez. She's a community leader in McAllen, Texas. She's been building the conservative movement in the Rio Grande Valley. If we ever get into the Rio Grande Valley, there's a lot of interesting stats of how Hispanics have shifted there in the last few years. But she's a leader in the area. She's also the chairwoman of a regional chamber of commerce. So very excited. Angelina, thank you for being here. All right, let's dive right into it. Look, when we talk about the economy, it's the number one issue for which voters went out to vote last year. It's the number one thing that I think most people are paying attention to. So when it comes to these trade deals, people have questions. People want the best for the country. They want to know if these deals matter to them, or not even if they matter to them, I would say, if they impact them in a positive way. A lot of supporters of the president are saying that this is a benefit because the president said that this will bring back jobs to the United States. It's going to create a more level playing field. The president has talked about that this will reduce dependency from China. But there's also a lot of critics, people on the left, who are saying that these tariffs will just bring a tax on the American consumer. It will also create trade barriers for a lot of trade partners. We've had trade agreements with Mexico and with Canada in the past. Driena, I want to start with you. How do you see it? There's a lot of opinions in this space. This is something that the president ran on. This is something that he's working on. Are people happy with what they're hearing?
Well, I think more than anything, people trust President Trump because his background, remember, isn't business, isn't finance. He's not a politician. So I'm pretty sure that more than anybody else, he would be one to run numbers first.
And a negotiator.
Exactly. And be surrounded by people that run numbers first to see what the consequences of these actions would be. And I think that we've seen that clearly, hey, we're not in a record level inflation because of these tariffs. Even Bill Maher, left-wing Bill Maher, had to go on a show the other day and say that he's sorry for saying that, hey, the economy was going to be in ruin because of these tariffs. That has not been the case. If anything, there has been a lot more opportunity for people here at home. We're seeing prices go down. It's what we see in our day-to-day and what we feel in our pocket. And I can personally attest to the fact that, hey, going to the gas station isn't, having my freaking jaw on the floor. Every single time I do that now. And I think most Americans see things the same way. And it's only going to get better from now. Also, we have to remember that this is a partnership, right? And so some of these agreements that have happened is part of that agreement is the other country agreeing to invest in the U.S. as well.
Correct. Yeah.
Even Japan has agreed to spend billions of dollars in rice, right? So something that they would be normally exporting, now they've agreed to import from the United States. And so we're seeing a lot of these agreements that are just mutually beneficial, because you can't say that you're protecting the American people if we don't have an equal playing field.
Yeah, I
Right?
think that's one of the points that I think a lot of folks were dissatisfied with the past when it comes to the amount of that we as consumers obtain from other countries or in our trading. There's a deficit, right?
Yeah.
The reality is we have American farmers, we have American steel, we have products that
Yep.
folks want to sell, that they want other countries to consume. So part of these agreements was that aspect.
Yeah, and it's been so lopsided for so long. That's something that the left has not mentioned. The fact that most of these countries had imposed insane tariffs on the US for years and years and years. So for decades, they have been charging us ridiculous prices. And so I think we should be recuperating some of that. It's not just like leveling the playing field now. We should try to recover from our losses. A lot of people are like, oh my God, these new tariffs being imposed are insane. Like, this doesn't seem fair. Poor other country. Google just what they used to charge us before President Trump decided to play hardball.
The New York Times had that famous headline that Trump cuts a deal with the EU. Does it benefit the EU? And I think Megyn Kelly was one of the individuals that said, well, the question the New York Times should be asking, does this benefit the American taxpayer, the American worker? And Angelina, I want to go to you, but before, on one of the points that you made right now, Driena, I think it's important for folks to understand that something that the administration has said, and even folks that study the economy and study the impact of these tariffs, is that this is not something that just by the waving of the wand, the economy will be better or we'll start seeing the impact at once. It's not that we cut the deal August 1st when it was announced and that all of a sudden now we're here, the second week of August and everything looks better. These things do take time. These investments, many of them are through a 5 to 7 year a period. So I think the president has asked folks, hey, give us a little bit of leeway here, right? There was a period of negotiation. There's also going to be a period of adjustments, and there's still many other countries that are still being negotiated. For example, Mexico is one of the countries where on August 1st, which was the deadline for many of these tariffs to be imposed, is when the president here in the United States and president of Mexico announced that they're actually going to do an extension because they're continuing to negotiate. But Angelina, I actually want to ask you a little bit of the politics of this. So when it comes to the news, when it comes to what folks are paying attention to, they're asking themselves, is this a win for the president, right? Many of the things that politicians do is not for political points, but let's be honest, many people are measuring things through politics. Is this a promise kept? Is this the way the president or many voters thought the president was going to go about? I'm curious to hear from you specifically. Do you think the announcement of these deals can the president already kind of take a victory lap, or should he wait? Is there still much more to come?
Well, it's important to highlight that these investments are up until 2028. However, this is absolutely a victory, and I believe wholeheartedly that this ties into why Hispanics, especially in my district in the Rio Grande Valle, is why we shifted to the right. And I can speak to this not solely as a Hispanic myself, but also as a Chamber of Commerce chairwoman who has to work hand in hand with business owners, is that naturally the Hispanic culture, we're workers. And the GOP, along with President Trump, has staunchly defended the American workers. And this trade deal has struck a historical balance. And it truly stands by us and our Latino values. The EU and the USA, they are the world's most massive economies. This is going to have a positive impact on Hispanics and our businesses and our GDP, for decades to come, because the EU, they're going to invest about $750 billion into our U.S. energy. Additionally, another $600 billion into U.S. investments. This is going to strengthen our United States energy stronghold. Tariffs will be eliminated. High-quality American jobs are going to be supported. Red tape for U.S. investors will be revoked. Ultimately, the president has stood by his promise with American workers, and we're going to win from this.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And Texas, I think, is such an interesting state when it comes to energy. I think people forget to remember the some of the highest paying jobs when it comes to energy are in Texas, and those many of those jobs are held by Latinos. So when the Biden administration in the last 4 years was attacking the energy sector and was really passing legislation that was beneficial just to one side of the equation, to those who were working on sort of solar or climate combating climate change, people in Texas saw that impact. They saw it not only across the country the way we saw gas prices go up, energy prices go up, but those were good paying jobs that were being hurt in that area. So I agree with you that I think as the president is thinking about these deals and people are thinking about jobs, Texas is one of those states where I think Latinos and just the entire population there will see a benefit. Jen, I want to ask you a little bit on the politics of this. On the other side of this is a lot of the attacks have come from Democrats. Expanding on your point on Bill Maher, the amount of late night show folks who attacked the president, the amount of pundits who said he doesn't know what he's doing, right? Because let's be honest for a second.
Yeah.
There was a lot of back and forth at the beginning, right? The
Yeah.
president came out and putting tariffs on Colombia originally, which was very nuanced because it was about immigration, but still tariffs. He announced tariffs on China, which is one of our largest trading partners, tariffs on Mexico and Canada, which we have the agreement that actually was placed under the administration. So a lot of people are saying, like, what is he doing? This is not going to end well. But I think at a certain point, people started saying, wait, is he playing, 3D chess,
Yeah.
4D chess? Do you think Democrats are actually going to be able to walk back some of their comments in this space?
Well, they're going to have to, or they're going to get canceled, just like some of the recent late night shows you just mentioned got canceled, right? They suck. Nobody's watching them.
Stephen Colbert was the latest one.
Exactly. He's the last victim, right? Of their own BS. Clearly, if they were more popular, they would have the ratings to keep him on, but that's not the case. So I'm glad that they keep shooting themselves in the foot, honestly. And so yeah, I mean, what you were mentioning, it's completely different what they're selling versus what we're living.
Very much so. And I think they're going to have to, they might not verbally say it, but they're going to recognize that the president, again, the art of the deal, the negotiator, is someone who has been really thinking 3, 4, 5 months down the line.
Yeah.
And we're seeing some of those results now. Another topic where I think many people have had a lot of criticism when it comes to the administration, but we're seeing reports and we're seeing new headlines that give them a little bit of credit, is when it comes to the role of deportations of violent criminals. That's something that the president ran on, saying that it was important to go after gang members, going after folks like El Tren de Aragua, MS-13, individuals who are in this country to do communities harm. And I want to note that many times the harm that's done, it's to the same Hispanic immigrant community that they come from, which is something I think is very sad, right? Coming to such a great country and then harming your own community. Not saying you should be harming others, just saying, like, in your own community where you live and the people that you know. And Angelina, I want to talk to you about this. You're in the Rio Grande Valley, again, Texas. I mean, when it comes to really being in the front lines, Texas is one of those states. But I want to start by reading some of the stats. So this report from the Department of Homeland Security cites that 17% of a nationwide drop in homicides across 30 U.S. cities. They're also saying that there's a decline of 21% in gun assaults, a 10% decline in aggravated assaults, and 10% in sexual assaults. And lastly, 24% down in carjackings. I mean, I remember during the last 4 years, these reports in Washington, D.C., Chicago, New York, of a rise of carjackings, of people being robbed for their cell phones. We've all seen the videos of young folks going into jewelry stores, Apple stores, just stealing products, and just really a rise in crime. I think we kind of saw a spike during the time of the pandemic. But we're also seeing this report that talks about how when you start eliminating violent criminals from the community, like folks del Tren de Aragua, going back to a point that I just made, I remember watching even on Univision and Telemundo, a lot of the reports of people. I remember seeing the video, the ring captured of El Tren de Aragua going into these apartment buildings, essentially taking over, going in with heavy armed, taking stuff from family. So the fact that now the assistant secretary has come out and emphasized that these arrests have helped take away some of that crime is a positive report for many. Angelina, I want to ask you, what's your takeaway? What's your analysis of this report from the DHS?
Well, in that article, DHS also stated that they're prioritizing criminals. Like you said, 70% of people being deported are undocumented residents who have committed or have been convicted of a dangerous crime. And it's really common sense. When you get rid of the criminals, naturally crime is going to decrease. However, a separate part of this that is not entirely due to the deportation is also what I like to call the Trump effect. So you see, in the previous administration, when you have a presidential administration such as the previous one that hates law enforcement, disdains it, of course, naturally, the nation is going to follow as well. They're going to follow that influence. So naturally, when Trump walks into office, he switched that narrative of supporting Leos instead. He's a staunch defender of our law enforcement. So naturally, we're seeing not only an effect in a decrease in crime due to the deportation, but likewise due to the man that's in office who has stuck by the side of law enforcement.
That's a big point. I think the Trump effect is something that we can measure in so many different areas, on trade, on immigration, on the economy. I think there's a boost from businesses that want to invest into the economy.
I think that it's just that people finally know that there's going to be consequences to their actions, right?
Very much.
And so you had even mentioned it in the previous topic we were talking about with the tariffs, like, oh, we're tariffing Mexico and China that have been these huge trade partners. Yeah, but they hadn't been playing so fair before. So they're going to suffer the consequences to their actions. And the same thing is happening now with our crime rates. People know that they're going to be prosecuted for that. So they're a little less likely to step outside of the lines, right?
Yeah.
Another thing that's really important is for the Latino community, especially, a lot of us, or our parents or even grandparents, left our home countries in search of better opportunities, right? In search of freedom and not just that safety, just a better quality of life.
Yeah.
So imagine them coming to this country to then experience the same lawlessness, the same kind of crime that they did in their home countries, right? It makes no sense. So that's why I feel like there has been such a shift in Latinos to support the Republican Party and to support the president and this administration.
That's exactly right. I think the public sentiment, I mean, we're actually going to get into polling on Latinos a little bit later, but the public sentiment for deportations, many folks were asking, why is it that Hispanics are in favor? Now, I want to be very careful here because this is a nuanced conversation. Why are Hispanics in favor of violent criminals being deported, right? Why is it that you saw that support towards the president? Because if we were to look at and analyze things through not understanding what Driena just pointed out, which is the fact that many people flee Latin America, one, for lack of opportunity, yes, but for safety as well. They flee violence. Look at El Salvador. El Salvador used to be one of the nations with the highest murder rate per capita in all of the Americas. And the number one thing that Bukele said he started with was safety. He said before people even think about can I have an economy where I can prosper and build what he calls the Salvadorian dream, he's like, I want to know if I'm going to be alive to be able to do that. So safety is such a thing. Being able to come here to the United States now, seeing neighborhoods run over by people who are here to do harm, that aren't here to work, a uno le da cólera, right? You're not, that's not something you're excited about. Angelina, I want to ask you, do you think this then empowers the president to continue? Because if we're going to be honest, on the topic of immigration, I think there has been some ebb and flows. There have been some Latinos who they see videos and they're like, hey, maybe I'm not seeing, I see that 70% that's violent criminals, but maybe then there's that other 30% where they're like, hey, man, that guy's part of the community. Maybe he shouldn't have been deported. So I think there's been a softening in the topic. But this report also gives them, I think, a little bit of wind. Where do you think the president can now continue and say, hey, we're going to continue to focus on these criminals, and that the community will say, this is good. This report shows that you can continue moving in this space?
I believe that the president and the GOP altogether really needs to lead on this issue. We have the opportunity to lead on this issue. It's gone untouched, unnoticed by the Democrat Party for decades. We have the opportunity to reform it. Now, I believe that we need to focus on forging a pathway for undocumented residents who have been here and have been law-abiding citizens, paying their taxes for years, likewise who are contributing to our GDP, those in construction, those in roofing. However, I do believe that while those changes are underway, that the president's responsibility needs to be our safety. And clearly, he's been conquering that issue. And there was a report recently by CNN, which is very fascinating, that legal immigrants are supporting his take on immigration. And I can wholeheartedly understand that, because living in the Rio Grande Valley, where 95% of us are Hispanic, I've had the privilege of speaking to numerous legal residents, including my family, who came here the right way, who started businesses, who raised families that contribute to our economy. And I constantly heard this repeated frustration with the Biden administration because they were rewarding illegal entry over legal process, their hard work into getting into this country. They saw that Biden's amnesty, his blanket amnesty, and allowing and condoning so many illegal immigrants to cross through our border was a betrayal to their hard work to becoming American citizens. And I don't believe anyone forgot about the tragedy in 2022 in San Antonio, where 53 migrants were killed in the back of a semi-truck, which is known as the worst migrant catastrophe in our country. And that was due to illegal entry. That is due to illegal immigration. When we have an administration that condones illegal immigration, children get lost, women get abused, and ultimately migrants are killed from it.
Yeah,
And this is why so many legal residents are supporting this.
yeah, there's a lot of horrific stories that we can point to. There's two key points that you made there that I want to emphasize. Is one, when it comes to the topic of immigration, this is where Democrats really lost their grip, I want to say, on the Hispanic community. I mean, they lost it in the economy, I think, even prior to that. But I think there were many Latino voters who were holding out or holding on to Democrats because they're like, you know what, but I'm going to get immigration reform, right? If my family can get that status, if we can get this issue fixed, then we can focus on the economy. The problem is that Democrats for so many years created so many promises, said they were going to get it done, blamed Republicans, but then did nothing. They were not is that they weren't able to deliver, they picked other topics and they just felt that they had a grip on the Hispanic Latino vote. And for them, it just didn't work out in that space. Driena, and I actually want to ask you on another point that Angelina made here is I think Republicans, what they've done for many years is talk that in order for there to need to be a more comprehensive immigration reform, they talked on the need to first focus on border security and on interior enforcement.
Yeah.
We're seeing that. We're seeing border numbers at a historic all-time low, and we're seeing enforcement numbers on the interior coming in. We're seeing now members of Congress like Maria Salazar, a Congresswoman, Monica de la Cruz in the Rio Grande Valley, and other folks stepping up. Do you think this creates a window for reforms that now focus on legal immigration, the visa process, possibly those working in the farm workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's say you have a spill, right? You have a leak in a dam, and so there's a whole mess of water to clean up. What's the first thing you do? You start mopping up the water, or do you put a patch on the leak, right? And so naturally, that's the first thing you do, which is what we're doing with our border security and enforcing our current immigration policies. We can't start talking about what are we going to do with the people that are here that we would like to keep here when the previous administration had an open border policy and allowed other countries to basically invade us. We had an invasion, and it was for strategic purposes because they tried to restructure the demographic in this country to favor them when it comes to elections. As you know, the way that this country is set up with our electoral college, the more people that you have in a state, legal or not, the more electoral votes you have. And so Democrats strategically allowed an invasion of people into this country to win elections in the future, and we cannot allow that. So we need to get all of those people out of here first, and then we can talk about the more humane solutions down the future, making it easier for people to migrate here that come to contribute to this country. Absolutely. I think
it's exciting, if I may add, because I think immigration is one of those topics that's tied to so many areas, right? I mean, if we're if we look at all the figures, the reality is immigrants do help when it comes to agriculture. But let's all look at tech. 51% of the billion-dollar startups that have come out of Silicon Valley are from immigrants. I mean, we contribute at so many different levels, but we need a valid legal system.
Yeah.
And if we go back and look at why we haven't updated it, for so many years, Democrats have talked with unions about caps. They talked about these folks having to have requirements of being part of a union and not having the liberty to sort of pick and choose the job of where they're at to participate and compete in the market. So when people complain that we don't have a vibrant legal immigration system, many times it's because of Democrats and how they hold. They haven't allowed sort of the free market to be part of the way that we move forward in this space. So I think it would be very exciting to see if we can get to the point where we have a immigration system that is working for the United States. I think that's a key point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another thing that's this administration is doing pretty well is showcasing what they're doing through social media. I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen
It's a bold strategy. It's
the
a bold strategy.
Instagram accounts for Border Patrol. You know, they're going with the flow. They hired a bunch of Gen Zers, and God bless them, they're finally making government entertaining.
Yeah.
And showing what the government is actually doing for the people. So I think that's a great strategy. Can
you go on that point a little bit more? Because I not to get too off topic, but yes, these social media accounts of this administration are both they're not afraid. I mean, and speaking on the immigration topic, I've seen pictures where it's been like they're putting up the mugshot of the person. They're saying this person raped X amount of people. This person is part of X gang and used to traffic fentanyl, and even a cartoon figure of one of the persons. And it's offended a lot of people, but it's gotten out the messages. Is that, in your opinion, the way to go?
Yeah,
that works?
Absolutely. It helps. Two main things. One, obviously to show the people that voted for this administration that they're getting what they wanted and asked for, what they voted for. And the other thing is it deters future people from doing these kinds of things. It's going to deter people from crossing the Rio Grande or, you know, crossing into the country in any other which way when you've got the Border Patrol freaking making TikToks and Instagram videos that are hilarious, but also serious, you know. So I think that's really important. The other thing, you know, I'm always going to be pretty fair in my assessment of things. I think that we can still do more, as in we can still ramp up the pace of these deportations that were promised, because God knows there's a long way to go with that. You know, when you had an open border for so long, it's going to take a massive effort to get all of those people out. And sometimes I feel like we do focus too much on the optics of things versus the doing. So, for example, alligator Alcatraz. I love it. I think it's a good idea when it comes to, you know, deterring additional people from coming into the country. But is it great optics within the Hispanic American population here in the U.S. that we're trying to kind of recruit to our side in the future, to have something that's, you know, supposed to be, I get it. I get the reasons for it, you know. It's something that's shocking and impactful and funny for some people, including myself. But I recognize that we are trying to bring in people to our side that are legal and are able to vote. There's plenty of Hispanics in this country that are legal, are able to vote, and they see alligator Alcatraz and they're like, this is kind of freaking crazy.
Yeah.
I'm not saying those people shouldn't be deported or sent out into the country. They sent out of the country. They absolutely should if they're not here legally, and then come back and do it the right way. Or, I don't know, self-deport using the app that lets you do that. Plus, you get paid $1,000. Like, where the hell else do you get that?
I'm taking it.
Right? Exactly. So there's other options to alligator Alcatraz. But I'm saying, I think that could be the only downside to, you know, the funny memes and the showing off what we're doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's tricky on that topic is, man, and immigration is so nuanced, and let's be honest, there's a bureaucracy behind everything that government does. But the fact is that ICE has not been funded, and their ability to trace. Here's the thing. I'm under the impression, and this is just kind of I think kind of logic, that it is easier to find an undocumented immigrant who's kind of following the law outside of what they already did than it is to find an undocumented immigrant who is breaking the law. Because there's the guy who uses a tax ID to go to work, who pays his taxes, who, is possibly registered, has his license, drives legally. In many states, you're allowed as an undocumented immigrant to have your license. This individual is fully registered with the government. Again, is paying his taxes. It's a lot easier to find that guy than it is the guy who doesn't pay taxes because he's selling drugs. The guy who's part of a gang, so he knows that he doesn't want to be found, who changes his address all the time, or who doesn't use an address because he doesn't want to be found, or who never went to get his license because he said, I know how to drive, and you know what? I'm never going to get caught. So ICE does need certain resources to be able to create these more targeted approaches. That's why in the One Big Beautiful Bill, apart from there being tax reforms, there were also funds for border security and to ICE because they need the funds to be able to target these
And the
individuals.
bodies, I heard they're hiring and they're paying six-figure salaries. So, ladies
Very
and
much
gentlemen,
so.
go for it.
Now, I do want to move on a little bit, talking about, I mentioned the One Big Beautiful Bill is that we are going into August recess. We're in August recess, and Democrats have called this their summer blitz, where they're really going to be looking at the last 6 months, not only of the administration, but of Republicans in Senate and in the House, and they're going to be trying to muddy the waters in this space. Angelina, when you think of Democrats going back right now to districts, to places like Texas, and trying to muddy the waters on what the administration has done, what they've done on trade, what they've done on the economy, what they've done on the One Big Beautiful Bill, on immigration. Do you think Democrats are going to be met with open arms? Are people going to be very sympathetic to their message? Or do you think they're going to find somewhat of a struggle, a community that doesn't maybe side with everything they are saying?
The Democrat Party definitely is out of touch with the needs of Latinos. Living in the Rio Grande during the Biden administration, especially, I had the privilege of knocking on hundreds of doors here in the hot equator sun. And if each knock with each door, it was a different perspective that remained ignored by the Biden administration. Like the mother who lives on the corner of Cedar Avenue in McAllen, who struggled between putting food on the table or gasoline in her car because of the crisis of inflation. Or the father of the door I knocked on in Brownsville, who is mourning the loss of his son to a fentanyl overdose because of the opioid crisis that has poisoned our children and that has poisoned our populace. We are no longer going to be accepting them with open arms anymore. It's a fact that we are bread and butter type of voters. And what I mean by that is that we're not confused with our needs as they think that we are. We care about practical issues, the issues that affect our homes and our families, such as gas, groceries, our children's education, our children's safety. All of these issues that the Biden administration and the Democrats failed to act upon. However, I do believe that this is not irreversible. Our districts here in the South Texas, we did have a historical win. We had a landslide victory for Trump. Most of South Texas counties historically voted for Trump. So the first time in years we voted for a Republican president. However, I believe that this next election is going to be that dictator, whether or not we truly did shift completely to the right. And so I do think that the GOP needs to remain proactive with our community, continuously learn about our needs, and overall what hasn't been impacting our homes specifically.
Driena, actually, to that last point, I mean, what do Republicans have to do to this? Because I look, I think many of us here have worked campaigns in the past. It's easier to sort of be on the offensive. By offensive, I mean like just pointing to the other side, right? They promised this and didn't do that, or the economy isn't at the number that we could have, or they can pull stats from different places. How do Republicans make sure that even though they, got, I think, one of the biggest priorities for the president done when it comes to tax reform, that they don't just say like, okay, the public is just going to know that we did our job and we can chill the rest of August?
Well, I think the most important thing is broadcasting, right? The work that is being done. Unfortunately, when it comes to the Latino American population in the U.S., for a very long time, they've only had Univision and Telemundo, especially those that don't speak English, to get their news from. But now there's alternative news places like the show that I work for. Exactly, the channel that I work for, Claro y Directo America. It is a daily news show where instead of tuning into the 6 p.m., 10 p.m. news, everybody can get their, actually stay well informed because it is a news show It goes from 10 to 2. That's just my little plug there.
Dale.
But Hispanic Americans can listen to the news on a daily basis without all the leftist propaganda. So what do Republicans need to do? Hello, promote stuff like that, right? They need to absolutely promote channels like Claro y Directo America that are doing this, that are bringing unbiased or even right-wing bias, because we are right-wing biased. We
Yeah.
are very pro-Trump, information to the public, because for a very long time, Latino Americans, left or right, they've had no choice but to swallow the propaganda from Univision or Telemundo. And so, history is written by those who write it. I think that's where we're at right now. The administration is doing fantastic things, but if the public doesn't see it, if Hispanic Americans in the U.S. that mostly speak Spanish don't see it, then it's all going to go to waste. So yeah, go to alternative media outlets, and Republicans promote these alternative media outlets as well. So
People have to show up in the community. Lawmakers specifically, they have to show up, because if not, you're just allowing the narrative to be driven by the other side. And I think that's another point. So we talked about how Democrats failed on the immigration front, but I also believe that Democrats really failed when it comes to showing up. They took the Hispanic vote for granted. They thought it was baked in their direction, but this last election proved that was not the case. Angelina, I want to ask you on this specific point. I mean, when you look at the latest polls and you look at the way voters have trended towards the Republican Party, do you think this summer, what's going to be the battle there? Is the battle for the soul of Latinos when it comes to the future of 2026? You got to remember that the Senate majority is going to be up for grabs. Same thing with the House. I think the current majority is only between 6 to 10 Republicans, which can easily switch. So when it comes to what you're seeing from Hispanic voters and polling trends, do you think it's up for grabs? Is there a battle there that needs to be fought between Republicans and Democrats?
Well, currently in the state of Texas, we are in a battlefield with redistricting. Actually, very recently, our Democrat representatives in the Texas Capitol, they last minute fled the state in an attempt to block the vote for the gerrymandering, which is not representation. This is political cowardice. Our taxpayers, we pay for their salaries, we pay for their staff salaries as well. And Governor Gavin Newsom, he actually attacked Governor Abbott on Twitter, saying that this was an attempt to rig the 2026 election, which I find very ironic, considering that in the state of California, there are 52 congressional seats, and only 9 of those seats are drawn to support the Republican nominee, although in 2024, 40% of California residents supported President Trump. So why is it that when it comes to redistricting, it's fine when California does it, and it's fine when Illinois does it, and it's fine when New Jersey does it? However, when Texas wants to defend our Texas constitutional values, we're attempting to rig the election. Now, personally, living in the Rio Grande, I support the new lines with redistricting. Why? Because I don't think it's fair that half of South Texans are being forced to be represented by a Democrat congressman who's currently under federal indictment for money laundering and conspiracy. And it's absolutely not fair that the other half of South Texas is being forced to be represented by another Democrat congressman who's an out-of-touch millionaire who defends coyotes, human smugglers, in his job as an attorney. So I understand that this whole redistricting issue, that it is uncomfortable for a lot of people. However, I wholeheartedly believe that it's going to forge prosperity, and it's going to restore the principle of law and order back to South Texas where it deserves.
Yeah, the redistricting situation right now in Texas is a topic that I know we're going to continue to revisit. It's really in the news. The last thing I saw, if I'm not mistaken, I think the Democrat state legislators, have walked out of, I don't know if it's the actual capital of the building of Austin, but essentially as a way of protest. But I think Governor Greg Abbott has really stood up and said that, look, you can either show up and do your job, which you're here to do, or we're going to maneuver things in a way to make sure that the people of Texas still have representation and still can move forward with some of these votes and some of these challenges that are being sought forward. I do think this is not a topic that's going away. It's interesting to see when Texas and California are always going head to head. And you mentioned Newsom, and Driena, I want to ask you, when you think of the new leadership or the new wave that needs to come from Democrats, what are the names that come to mind? A lot of folks talk about Newsom, There's also the mayor. His name's escaping me right now, but the governor, I would say, of Maryland. African American gentleman. Some folks have talked about that he's charismatic, that's someone who can really sort of bring that sector. Because when you look at polling, I have it here when it comes to black voters, President Trump was able to double what he did in 2020. I'm sorry, from 2016, his first election, to last year, he was more than double the support of African American voters. So there's a lot that Democrats have lost in. We mentioned immigration. We've mentioned just the sweep in this election. Who's that new wave of leadership? Who's the one who's going to take them out of where they're at?
I think that right now the problem is that nobody wants to slap their face as the head of a disaster, of a political shit show. Nobody wants to be the face of the Democrat Party because it is in shambles. That's why the other day they stuck that David Hogg kid as the vice president of the entire Democrat National Committee, which is hilarious, right? Yeah. I think that obviously, some of the first names that come up is Michelle Obama, but I don't know how popular she's going to be, a few years down the line. This is my take, which is probably going to surprise a lot of people. Hunter Biden. It would make your jaw drop, right? With all of his insane background and history. But have you seen him go on podcasts and talk? And even though what he says is wild, like trying to teach people how to make crack cocaine on a podcast, the guy's funny just by being authentic and being weird. And the Democrat Party, I've seen, responds very positive to that. And so Hunter Biden, believe it or not, I think is a player in that future of the Democrat Party, because they've already owned how pretty much depraved they are. They're like, yeah, we're the Democrat Party, and our freaking president's son smokes crack. That's who we are. We're going to put that guy to represent us now. And I think Democrats would find it hilarious and actually would vote for him.
I think if that's the direction that they go, I think the word future could be taken out of the statement, because
I would hope that's the case.
Yeah, because, right after the election, the individuals that we saw kind of rise to the front were Bernie Sanders, who one of the oldest senators on the left, AOC, who, you're talking about completely to the left, someone who's auto-declared herself a socialist. Newsom, I will say, I'll give him a little bit of credit. He sat down with Charlie Kirk. He wanted to have a real conversation. I think many people saw that he shift on some of the topics.
That the trans topic especially.
Yeah, on athletes sort of recognizing that women should compete with women. It was very nuanced, because he was sort of like, that's what I believe, but there's a difference of what's in law. And
and then he went back on it and still supported women.
Where it's interesting, where I think he's trying to figure out even his own sort of political identity and what the future for him might be in that space. All right, I do want to get to wrap up to one of these last topics is a quick reaction from you guys. Sydney Sweeney and American Eagle continue to be in the news, and as we mentioned earlier, their stock has gone 10% up than when it did originally. This is one of those topics where now I think people are even bringing in Beyonce. I forget if it was Guess or Calvin Klein. One of the brands did. This was a while back. An ad with her as well. But really at the center of this conversation has been the phrase Sydney Sweeney has good genes. We've seen folks from the left say that the people that should most be offended of this are black girls, Latina girls, because they don't look like Sydney Sweeney. I want to ask both of you guys. Both of you guys are Latinas. And Angelina, I want to start with you. What's your reaction to this topic and the messages that you're hearing around it?
Unlike the bulk of my generation, I suppose, I did not lose sleep over Sydney Sweeney's genes. I think that as a generation, we've spent too much time and focused on this, which isn't even an issue. Overall, I do think it's great for American Eagle, however, that now they're no longer bending the knee to this woke playbook. So I think this will start this domino effect for other corporations to feel the need to market well, and no longer to bend the knee to some woke mob. But no, this didn't offend me whatsoever.
Yeah, very much. Ziana, what's your reaction?
Well, I thought that she has great genes in both senses of the word. She does, because she's hot, not because she's Caucasian, okay? And hot comes in all colors and size, Latina is just, you can be hot if you're Latina, you can be hot if you're Black, you can be hot if you're Asian, whatever. That's what it was referring to. And most normal people can take a joke,
Yeah.
but the left can't because we know they're a little bit, uh, a little bit,
Get offended very quickly.
yeah,
It's in
exactly.
that
Just
space.
people that aren't that intelligent really can't take a joke. We already know at this point that something isn't right up there since, I mean, to declare yourself Democrat still at this point in time, there has to be something wrong up there since they can't differentiate between genders, right? So it would make sense that that would extend into not being able to understand and take a joke like a freaking normal person. In addition, this also roots from one of the core values of the left, which is envy, right? Socialist, communist, their core values of those ideologies are envy. And so what they advocate for is taking from others normally. And in this case, I think what it has shown is that there's a lot of envious, unhappy people in this world, and you cannot cater to those people. Those are the people that need to be put into their place. And clearly, Americans vote with their pockets, right? And if that weren't the case, the American Eagle stock would have plummeted. It did the absolute opposite. So we should keep having ads like these and let them lose their collective minds.
Yeah, and a point I think both of you folks made is that it empowers American Eagle and other companies to be able to feel that they don't need to bend that knee, that they can stand on their original ad, they can stand on what they can believe, and stand on what was really just a good commercial and good advertising to try to sell jeans. Well, folks, there you have it on this show. We've had Angelina coming in from the Rio Grande Valley, Driena here in studio. Thank you both for joining us, and thank you again for the audience tuning in. This has been The Game, where we analyze politics play by play. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.